Literal life-changing words for me. There was teacher life before I heard this, and then teacher life after I heard this. Stop working harder than your students. There are 25 of them and one of us. We're the ones dragging ourselves out the door every day. And like we're breaking our backs only to get like a lukewarm response from our students. And sure, no one taught us how to do these things, like add it to the growing list of things that we didn't learn how to do in our teacher prep programs, we didn't learn how to do in college. The stuff that's like absolutely draining us to where we're like questioning all of our life choices by the time we walk out the door. That is what comprises like 95% of our jobs. If you are new here, come in. We are teachers just like you. We have like a complicated relationship with teaching. We know that if we like tighten up our classroom management just a little bit, we could love our jobs so much. We want to love our teaching jobs again. So I am your teacher big sister. I am here to help. I have been there. I have done that. I have spent 13 years in my classroom, like fine tuning my classroom management to make it to where it's efficient, it's vibey, it feels good for me and my students. We're productive, we're learning, we're supportive. It feels like a great classroom community, and I'm gonna help you get there. We're gonna talk about the actual problems that we are facing in our classrooms. I'm gonna tell you what you can do to fix it. I'm gonna do some modeling for you. We're gonna talk about if-then scenarios. I don't wanna hear, it's too late, we're already into the school year. That's not true. Would you rather, so this is the time of year where things get really hard. The rubber meets the road, the honeymoon phase is done. Would you rather push through and have a little bit of hard right now, or let it go and have hard the rest of the year? Right? This is the time that we need to fix these problems. So see if some of these things sound familiar. These are some of the problems that like new teachers who struggle with classroom management, teachers who just didn't have the support that they need run into, especially this time of year. So we have like whack-a-mole vibes of where you're just like constantly running out trying to like support students like with their work, like with their learning, or we're putting out like little behavior spot fires constantly, repeating ourselves like directions and like our lesson instructions 5,000 times a day to only get like a half response from our students. Student learned helplessness, like that hole is so hard to dig ourselves out of. We're running ourselves ragged by doing activities, doing little tasks around the classroom that able-bodied children could and should be doing. However, we can't get like a strong enough grasp on our classroom, enough control over our classroom to be able to like delegate those tasks. So that being said, by the end of this video, I want you guys to be able to have at least one thing that you're going to be able to put into place tomorrow that's going to help your classroom be like more systematic. 2 new things that you can put into place during your instruction that are going to help your kids be on task and be productive and be independent, aka not need you. And then after watching this video, by the end of the week, I want you to feel like a quarter of the work that you typically do around your classroom has been shifted onto your students. Okay, I know you guys already know this is coming. The first thing that we're going to talk about is, of course, routines and procedures. I talk about that almost in every single video, but through the lens of making our students work harder than us, we're going to talk about routines and procedures that are going to help your classroom flow, as well as routines and procedures that are going to build student independence, shift the tasks, shift the workload over to them. Put some stuff in place that they can do. Put some stuff in place that we used to be doing, but now they're going to do it. This is going to be your key in not repeating yourself 5,000 times. You're going to have a system, a way to do things every single time, the same way every single time. If you don't already have a checklist of routines and procedures, I'm going to link this in the description for you guys. Please go grab this. There is also a really helpful video on routines and procedures. 1, rolling them out. 2, making sure that they actually like stick in your classroom. I highly recommend those videos if you have not watched those yet. Okay, so let's talk about some of the routines and procedures on my checklist that are going to help build your students' independence. Okay, the first routine or like system that you're going to put in place, it's going to take like a huge weight off your shoulders, is a system to manage student absences, especially if you are in like a highly mobile campus. This could be something as simple as like a catch-up folder that goes on students' desks. This is really good in like a self-contained classroom because as you're like passing papers out throughout the day, you'll just leave those papers on that student desk and then they get put into a folder. When the student comes back to school the next day, there it is, everything's ready for them. Another option is like hanging files in a crate where it's like sorted by subject or sorted by like students' names, sorted by days of the week, and students know just to like grab the papers that were from yesterday. I personally stapled like a folder to the wall and I had these papers. I can also link those in the description for you guys. They were while you were out pages where I made notes of like what our lessons were, what work was completed, where certain papers went, what needed to be turned in, and when students should do that work. I also have a student job of attendance clerk. My student attendance clerk would help me like filling those out, stapling all of that work together to the while you were out page, and then we would just stick it in the wall file with the student's name on it. And my students knew that that was like an expectation in my classroom. Whenever you came in, they would go to that absence folder and just pull out their paper. Another system that if you don't already have this, put this in place tomorrow. Some type of system that's like very efficient and systematic for passing out student papers or passing out like student materials, math workbooks, book bins, whatever it is. It could be like a lead student at the table. One person starts passing it out, like you give them the stack, they take one and pass the stack. For like older kids, you could have papers like placed in a designated area, and as students enter your classroom, they know to like pick that up on their way to their seats. turn in their homework at a certain place whenever they come in. And remember, whatever you decide, again, I have a video on this, like how to roll these things out. Whatever you decide, make sure that you teach to the students, you explain to the students, you talk about what you do and don't want to see whenever you're rolling out the system of passing out papers. And then you guys practice it together to make it like super systematic and efficient. I'm sure you guys already have a system for like your daily materials like pencils, table supply caddies, whiteboards, clipboards, things like that. Some ways to like shift that over to the students is making sure that those are in an area where students can like easily access them. They're organized like per table group, or they're like chunked somehow to where you don't get like a big like rush of students all at one place. Maybe it's a student's job to like pass those things out. It's a student's job to like maintain them, sharpen them, straighten them up, refill them as needed. Like I said, most teachers already have like a system in place for that, but just know that that's a place where you can like shift some of the responsibility onto students and take it off of yourself. If you don't already have an extra copies area, that's something that you can put in place tomorrow. I always had like a crate with like the hanging files, and it was organized by subject, but I also know that you can organize it by like day of the week or dates or class periods. My student who passes out papers knows that the extras, whenever they're done passing out papers, go in the extras bin for the certain subject that we're doing. And then you will never hear, I lost my paper, or this fell out of my science notebook, or whatever it is, I never got the homework this week. They know not to burden you with that. They go to the extras bin and find what they need. Again, you have to teach them how to use it. You have to reinforce that they're using it. You have to model, you have to tell them the do's and don'ts for using that extras bin. But consider that like an investment of your time. You're putting effort in now, and the rest of the year will be like smooth sailing once that routine like becomes second nature to them. Next, I have not heard, what do I do? I'm done. What am I supposed to do next? Literally in years. And that's because I have used a must do, can do format up on my screen while my students are working, literally since I heard the quote of never work harder than your students. I anchored up on my screen either using like a slide or classroom screen, or I have it written on a sticky note on my document camera. Must do is the task that they are working on. Can do is tasks that they can do whenever they're done. Sometimes it's one thing, sometimes it's two things, sometimes it's a choice of four things, but I use the exact same system every single day, every single time. It becomes second nature for my students. We always start off with like one or two can do options, something that they can do independently, something that they already have their materials for. And then as time goes on, I can slowly work in like other can do options. When you're rolling that out, or if you're going to choose to roll that out like this week, something that you can do to like incentivize students not asking you or telling you that they're done is just like incentivize with like stickers or tallies or whatever. When students finish their must do exactly how they're supposed to, they turn it into the turn-in tray, go sit back down at their seats and open up their library book, or start working on their math game from yesterday, or whatever your can do options are. If you notice that students do that without bringing it to your attention, like you can give them a sticker, you can verbally say, like, I noticed that so-and-so is done and now they're working on their can do. Again, I have a whole video on how to roll out and reinforce your routines and procedures. Okay, and then the last routine that you can put into place that is going to shift the load, the workload from you over to your students is your transitions. And I know we all have transitions, but it's how you do your transitions that's going to make your life so much easier. So these transitions include like not just the main ones of like coming in the morning and then pack up. We're also talking about like switching from social studies over to recess, or switching from snack time over to your reading mini lesson, coming into the classroom after lunch, being on the floor for a mini lesson, going back to your seats. Getting those like super efficient is going to make your life so much easier. So here are some things for like brushing up your transitions, both in the classroom and moving out of the classroom. One, they should be like timely. Set a timer, put on like an ASMR YouTube video, and by the time that's done, they should be like, back in their seats or whatever it is. And let students know you guys have 10 seconds. You're counting down. You guys have 5 seconds. 4. Everyone's in their seats in 3. Everyone is seated in 2. Our voices are off in 1. Like they should have like a sense of urgency when they're transitioning. This isn't just like at their leisure. 2, kids should know exactly what to do, like what the order of steps are, what your expectations are for this transition every single time. Ideally, the end goal for your transitions is that you can sit down in your rolly chair and you're facilitating the transition while students are doing everything that they need to do. When you're teaching your students a transition, or you're thinking about like how to come up with a transition for your students, like what you want them to do, come up with like an order of steps. First, you're going to stand up and push in your chair. Then you are going to walk calmly to your cubby. Next, you're going to take your red math workbook out of your book bin. Make sure you set an expectation for voice levels. Right now, I need you to know if you are struggling with classroom management, if classroom management is something that is keeping you up at night, especially talking, your transitions need to be silent. Transitions are when behaviors happen, and we also don't have as good of control over our classrooms when there's talking during transitions. So if your goal is to tighten up your classroom management, the expectation for your transitions, expect your students to be silent. Transitions are also a great time for your students to be tidying up. So make that an expectation is that students like check their area, tidy up their space, have them come back and pick up that pencil where they were seated, have them go back and put that book back in their book bin the way it's supposed to, have them turn around and push in that chair. It's a great time to keep your classroom tidy. That takes the load off of you when you have to clean up after dismissal. And then, of course, add this to the list of things that we did not learn in college. This is going to help them with executive functioning. This is a great time for our students who are super lacking in executive functioning. This is a great time for them to like brush up on some of those skills. Pathway to Success on Instagram is a great resource for all things executive functioning in our students. When I do transitions in my classroom, I make sure to embed time for them to put their papers in the correct folder. Great, I see all of us have put our math worksheet into our green unfinished work folders. When I see that everyone's green folders are closed, I will start calling us to go to our backpacks. See, that's how I can like work in time to make sure that everyone is keeping their materials organized. Maybe in the mornings or during pack up, we're taking time together as a class, 5 minutes up on the board to write our homework in our planners. As students are writing their homework down in their planners, I come around with a marker and I can check it to make sure they did it correctly in the correct spot. And that's their signal to go pack up for the day, to go to their backpacks. Having an anchor chart of like the steps or your expectations for all of your transitions in your classroom is a great way to support students' executive functioning skills. And then another must for your transitions in your classroom is having like many checkpoints throughout your transition before moving on to the next step. So for example, I'm about to call students that are sitting on the carpet to go to their seats to start working on their math workshop work. A checkpoint would be, okay, I'm gonna start calling students when I see that you have your math workbook and your pencil in your hands. I'm monitoring to make sure that my students have that. Great, row 1, you guys can go back to your seats, start working on your work. Still waiting on some people in row 2. Okay, row 3, I see that you guys are all ready. You guys may go start working on your work. Like, do you see how I'm like checking to make sure that we're all ready before we move on to the next step? And also I am controlling when we do move on to the next step. Again, if you're like, yes, this is what I need. Yes, I want to know more. Watch these videos. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is like our instructional practices. When I think about like my first year in the classroom, instructional practices is what had me like dog tired at the end of the day. I remember like during my math lessons, just like constantly running around, like 18 out of 22 kids had their hands up needing my help. We're done with that. We're not doing that over here. I also remember like giving my students their work and being like, okay, like do your work. And like, of course they didn't know what to do. Of course they all needed help. Of course, none of them knew like what they were supposed to be doing. We're not doing that over here. A way to support our students' executive functioning skills during our lessons is to point out important information or new skills. So for example, once your students are seated or once your students are like have their materials out and they all have their attention on you, saying something as simple as like, okay, today we're going to learn how to use a map key to help us understand how to read a map. Today we're going to learn how to find a sentence that matches what our character traits are. Or even saying something like, okay, today you guys are learning something new. You know, in 4th grade, you guys learned how to multiply 2-digit by 2-digit numbers. But in 5th grade, we're going to learn how to multiply 3-digit by 2-digit numbers. That's like a super simple tweak that you can make that's going to help your students not only like during your lesson, like while they're acquiring new knowledge, but 2, while they're out doing their work. Okay, the next thing you can do, instead of doing what I did my first year where I just like gave my students their work and told them to go get their work done, especially if you have students who are below level, like most of us do these days, like almost all of our classrooms are all below grade level, is chunking that assignment. So I know sometimes it can seem like, oh my God, my students aren't getting it. And so we wind up doing the work together. All that's doing is like feeding the learned helplessness, like spoon feeding your students that learned helplessness. So instead, I know in college, they talk about like scaffolding and scaffolding. What scaffolding actually looks like in the classroom is starting your work together, like giving them question 1, you guys do it together. Give them directions for question 2. Set a timer on the board. You guys have 1 minute to get through question 2. When you're done, put your pencils down and put your hands on your head, and that shows me that you're ready. And then coming back together to check question 2. Great, now I want you guys to go work on questions 3, 4, and 5. I'm gonna give you guys 10 minutes to work with your table groups. When you're done, go ahead and answer questions through 12. You set that timer. When that timer goes off, you check in together. You get all of your students' attention on you. You're not spoon feeding the entire work together. Like they're not just like copying down what you're writing. You're supporting them. They're doing their own work. You guys are coming together to check it. Doing questions like 1, 2, and 3 together, or like starting the task together and then letting them go on their own. The gradual release model, so like I do, we do, you do, is another great way to support your students. All of these ways have your students showing you that they know what to do. So then whenever it's time for them to go do their work, you already showed me that you know what to do. One of the keys there is that in that we do part, or whenever you guys are checking over questions that you just gave them time to do, you're checking for understanding. You're actually making sure, you're actually like checking to see what they got wrong. What do they know? What misconceptions are they making? What mistakes are they making? Can they actually go do this on their own? Maybe we need to do one more problem together. Maybe they don't need you to go over another problem with them. Maybe they can do it on their own. Something else that I wish I did in my first year, whenever giving students like independent work or my students are getting something done, is making sure that I find a way to like hold them accountable in completing that task. Setting a timer up on the board, like something that they can visually see that tells them like what time constraints they have. A sense of urgency when my students are getting started. Something like, great, I should see everyone in their seats, pencils working in 5. I should see everyone in their seats, pencils working in 4. Great red table, I see all of you guys are working. 3, 2, I'm waiting on 1. I'm still waiting on 1 to get their paper out. Like, you're communicating like a sense of urgency there. And then in holding students accountable and completing that work, you have to have a way to like follow up with your students if when that timer goes off, if their work is not finished. It could be something like, okay, when the timer gets off, like you go over to your turn-in tray and you're highlighting names as you see that they've turned them in. You look at your roster and you're like, oh, I see so-and-so and so-and-so's names aren't highlighted. When are you guys going to complete that work? During your lunch? You're going to do it for homework? You're going to do it first thing in the morning? Whatever it is, like have a plan for when those students are going to finish that work. Okay, and then the key here in making sure that that works is you have to follow up with them. That's something I was really bad about, so I wound up writing those names on sticky notes. My desk would be like covered in sticky notes. I'd have it on my laptop, I'd have it on my planner of students who needed to finish that work. That way I could follow up with them. Hey, it's lunch and you don't have your paper in your hand. I could see them the next morning. Hey, you told me you were going to do that for homework. Where is it? Oh, you don't have it? Okay, like what's next steps? Holding yourself accountable and holding them accountable. Okay, and then something else that you can try tomorrow, something that you can do in your classroom tomorrow to mitigate students not finishing their work, to make sure that students are actually like completing their work, pushing along that sense of urgency, helping kids stay on task, is using that must do can do. But let me model for you guys like how I actually use my must do can do in my classroom. Okay, so I use Canva for like my daily agenda template. So I'll have like a column that says must do and then a column that says can do with a place for the timer. So let's say I have all of my students, you know, their attention is 100% on me. I'm typing up on the screen as I'm giving them directions, and I'll say something like, okay, your must do today is to use your landforms notes that we just completed together to label all of your landforms. So I'm typing that like in bullet form on my must do column. I'm also going to add on there, this is silent, independent work. And then I'm going to say to my students, that is your must do. You must have this finished in 15 minutes when that timer goes off. It must be in the turn-in tray when that timer goes off. Then I'm going to go over to my can do column and I'm typing. When you have turned that paper into the turn-in tray, you can do, I'm going to list these 2 things as bullet points. You can go to Google Classroom and do your landforms choice board. That's bullet 1. Or you can practice your landforms matching game that we practiced yesterday. Then I'm going to click present on my slide, make it full screen. I'm going to turn to my students and I'm going to say, okay, so when I send you off to your seats, you're going to use your notes to label your landforms. You're going to turn it in and then you're going to choose a can do option. Then I'm going to send my students off to go work. Either they're on the floor with me because we just did a lesson together and I'm going to send them to their seats, or I'm passing out their papers and they're opening up their notebooks to get this work done. There's going to be structure to how those students get to work. There's going to be some like sense of urgency, like, okay, great, I see yellow table is already working. Blue table, someone doesn't have their social studies notebook out. Maybe you put a stack of papers like at every table group and they're grabbing their papers. Maybe your classroom secretary is passing out papers to each table group. Maybe if your students are on the floor, they can go once they've gotten their paper that you gave them. If you have students on the floor and you're calling them to go back to their seats, calling students who are ready will leave you with students who are not ready. That is a great time. If you have those students who are still sitting on the floor because they weren't ready, that's a great time to repeat those directions. That's a great time to start that work together, do question 1 or 2 together. You know you have students that are going to need support. Don't call them to go back to their seats. Have them stay there on the floor and you guys can start getting that work done together. So while my students are working, I have that screen up, my timer is going, the must do and the can do are posted, and I have those voice level expectations. Mine said silent, independent work. But it could be partner work, it could be group work. I could have like the little voice level numbers, level 1, level 2, whatever. And then as your students are getting to work, you can use like that positive narration to reinforce what you want to see. Great, I see so-and-so is using her notes, just like we said. I love how everyone at the blue table is doing their work silently and independently. I love how everyone at the green table has their names on their paper. Like, you're just reinforcing those things that you want to see in your classroom. Okay, and then a key to keeping your kids on task while they're working, whether it's silent work, it's group work, it's partner work, I hate to say it because we didn't learn enough about it. We don't have enough support to do this. It's differentiation. But let me show you guys like some easy ways to differentiate your work for your students to where they can be on task, they can get their work done, the rest of your group is on task and working. Around this time of year, you usually have like a pretty good understanding of like your students who are going to need your support this year. Maybe you already have their IEPs or whatever. You can either like push into them, like go sit with them, or pull them to you if they're not all seated in the same spot. And you guys can start that work together. Like, okay, let's get out our social studies notebooks. Let's look at our landforms notes. Okay, question 1. You can model what you want them to do. Like, okay, I'm looking at my notes. I see this, and you guys can do the answer together. Question 2, let them do more of the thinking. Question 3, okay, I'm gonna let you guys work and I'm gonna come back and check on y'all in just a minute. I would usually take like my master notebook, like my model notebook that I would use with my students, and I would leave that with that group. Like that's an accommodation a lot of times, is like a copy of the notes. That doesn't mean you need to like run to the copier and hurry up and make a copy of the notes to give to them every day. It just means that like they can use your notes, your notebook, your model that you did up on the screen with them. But after you work through like a few questions together, leave your notes with them. I want you guys to work on questions 4 through 8. I'm gonna go and circulate with some of the other kids in the class. I wanna come back and see how you guys have done, okay? Go out, circulate, check in on the other groups, check in on the other kids working, come back and check on that group. Another way to differentiate for those students who you know are going to struggle is do less questions for them. Like cross off certain questions, or you guys only need to do the even number questions. Okay, I want you guys to circle 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those are the questions that you need to do today. When you're done with those, you can turn your paper in. However, disclaimer, make sure you guys document that. Whether they already have an IEP or a 504 or whatever it is, or they're like below level, they need these accommodations, make sure you guys are documenting this like on a sticky note, on a form that you already have, in your grade book. I know different districts, different states have different requirements for that. Your whole group struggles, you guys can check in. Like once you've sent them off to work, you guys can check in around like the 5-minute mark. Okay, I want your pencils down. Everyone's eyes on me. We're going to check in together. Voices off in 5. Pencils down in 4. Eyes on me in 3. And like you get your students under control with your attention getter so that you guys can look at, I don't know, maybe you have your worksheet there and you're like, oh crap, question 2 is really tricky. Let's go over that one together. So differentiation doesn't need to be like this big scary thing that requires like lots of prep. It can be as simple as pulling students who need extra support to you, going over some questions together first, and then letting them get their work done. It's your whole class. It can be as simple as doing 1 or 2 questions together. You let them go work, bring them back together after a certain amount of time, check it. Okay, go do some more questions. Like you're chunking that assignment for them. That's going to mitigate like 95% of your off-task behaviors, making sure that all of your students basically have what they need. However, I know, what about the talking? What about if my students are off task? My students are talking. First thing is a very small, simple tweak that you can make tomorrow. It's a strategy called be seen looking. And that means that if you give your students an expectation, you make a show, like you're dramatic about monitoring to see who's following that expectation. If you give a direction, you tell your students to get out your yellow folders and then you turn around and you're doing something else, you're not going to get great compliance from them. However, if you're standing there and you say, okay, my expectation is that we all have our yellow folders out in 10, you're standing there, you're monitoring, you're watching them, you're positively reinforcing who has their yellow folders out, you're restating what you want to see, you're going to get way better compliance. You're going to get way more kids like meeting your expectations that way. Your expectation is that students are doing silent, independent work. Then you say, this is silent, independent work, and you stand up there and you're monitoring. Great, I see that the green table is all working silently, thank you. Like you're getting them all silent first, and then you can go, sit down at your small group table, or you can go take attendance, or you can go do whatever it is, but you're still monitoring. As soon as you hear that whispering, as soon as you see those boys look up at each other and start, making eye contact, you grab it right then. Stop it right then and there. It's my 95% rule. We want to keep our behavior like operating in the top 95%, catching all those little 5% things in the bud instead of letting it all go. And then suddenly your class is operating at 50% of them are following directions. It's so much harder to get your class back on track when they're down here at 50% versus keeping it up here, maintaining that 95%. Does that make sense? So here's what that looks like. You see the whispering. You see the kids making faces at each other. You see the kid get his Chromebook out and we're not doing Chromebook work. You catch it. You give them a warning. What's our expectation right now? So do you need your Chromebook for that? Right. What's our expectation for talking? It's silent, independent work. Don't entertain that I wasn't talking. Just brush right over it. Okay, so that's your warning. Can you do that for me? Great. Even if they're like, I wasn't talking. Okay, can you do that for me then? Great, thank you for working silently. Now they know they get a consequence next time. You move their seat to come sit by you if they can't stop talking. You let their parent know. They lose their dojo point, whatever it is. We're not giving a bunch of warnings over here. We remind them of the expectation or ask them what the expectation is, and then they get a consequence. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to talk about for like taking stuff off of your plate and putting it onto your students' plates is student jobs. I started student jobs for my students where every single kid in my class had a task to do, a job, and I have never looked back. My mentor teacher was the one who like told me about this. We did it together. She has a job for every single student with very like official job titles. They fill out applications, they get your hired letters whenever she assigns the jobs, and it has been a great system. If you think about it, there are so many little tasks that we do throughout the day that our students can easily do. Student jobs also keep your students busy. Thank you guys in the comments for helping me with the phrase, idle's time is the devil's playground. If your students are busy, that keeps them on track. That's less time for them to start cutting up. Student jobs do a great job of building a sense of community. Your students are going to care about the classroom, the state of the classroom. They're going to have more buy-in, more like intrinsic motivation when they have a student job. Obviously, it teaches your students life skills, and then your class is going to start running itself by October. So I use this jobs presentation. It's available for you guys. I can link it in the description for y'all. I show it to my students, and as I'm going through each slide of all the student jobs, I tell my students to keep in mind like what jobs sound interesting to them, what qualities or characteristics they have that sound like a good fit for these jobs, as well as think about like what would not be a job that they would want. So like I said, we do this presentation. They fill out job applications. I assign their jobs and then give them your hired letters. And it's like a whole thing. It's so cute and the kids love it. But if you're like, damn, that is way too much, open up your notes app right now or write it on a sticky note tomorrow at school. Think about what are your biggest needs in your classroom? What are all those little things that you're doing throughout the day that are like dipping from your bucket? Of course, I have my list available of the jobs that I've used for years, but it could be something as simple as, oh my God, my kids always leave their lunch bags or their coats on the playground after recess. That could be a student job. Oh my God, my kindergartners are always getting lost going to the nurse. That could be a student job. Our math workbooks are always disorganized. I never remember to update the date on the board. I need someone to help with like library check-in so I can go help my students find just right books. My classroom phone is ringing 5,000 times a day for stuff that doesn't really need my input or help. I need a snitch to find out who's been making this mess of the bathroom sink. Absence work, passing out papers, someone to take your keys and hang them up on the hook by the door every time you come into the classroom so that you stop losing your keys. All those little things that were on us before, a student can do those. You don't want to deal with having your students apply or you have younger students. That's fine. Get those your hired letters, write their names of who you're assigning that job, and then like present it to them and explain why you chose them. You always pack up so calmly and quickly. You always keep your book box so nice and tidy. You always notice when something is missing. It'll be like an honor when you give them their jobs. After I give my students their jobs, they're your hired letters, I use the next few days or weeks to like train them on their jobs. And then sure, in the beginning of the year, we need lots of reinforcement, lots of reminders. I'm checking in with them constantly to make sure they did things correctly. And then I keep track of strikes. And if they get 3 strikes, they're fired. Personally, we rotate jobs for me every 9 weeks, but I've had years where they've had 1 job all year. I've had years where we rotate every month. It just like varies based on needs. And then a commonly asked question that I get asked a lot is like, what happens if no one applies for a job or multiple kids want the same job? Just try to be like flexible about it. Sometimes I've given 2 kids the same job and we've come up with like a split schedule, like we split the duties somehow. At morning meeting, I might say like, no one applied for this job and this job. Raise your hand if you're interested, and I'll write their names down and then decide on my own who gets that job. It can be a little tricky, like a game of chess, assigning jobs. However, it is worth it. It's like an investment in something that helps my students like run the classroom for me. And just know that you have to stick with it. 5th graders like get the hang of it pretty quickly, but if you have like younger students or maybe an immature group of students, keep those jobs for a long time. Keep those jobs all year if you need to. Like it takes a while to get some of these things down, but just be consistent with any of these things. Be consistent. You're going to hit a hump soon. It always happens in the fall where things get really, really hard. And that hump doesn't just apply for like student jobs. October, late September is hard. That's when it really hits the fan. It gets tough. You have to be consistent and like lay the groundwork now. Okay, so here are today's takeaways. At the beginning of the video, I said that I wanted you guys to have one thing that you can put in place tomorrow to be like more systematic in your classrooms. Maybe you're gonna write down all those little needs that you have in the classrooms that a student can do to come up with some student jobs. Maybe you're gonna start using a timer during transitions. Maybe you're gonna try the be seen looking strategy. You're gonna create like an extras bin for extra copies or a system for absences. And then I also said that I wanted you to have 2 things that you could try for instruction this week to keep your kids like on task and accountable. Maybe you're gonna try like the gradual release of starting your work together and then letting them go and then checking in for support and then letting them go again. Maybe you're gonna send kids off to go work, but you're gonna keep a group with you for support. Maybe you're just going to positively narrate students who are getting to work right away. You're going to use that must do can do. You're going to print out a roster and use that to keep track of who turned in their work and who needs to follow up tomorrow. And then I also said I wanted you to feel like at the end of the week, you have shifted 25% of your workload over to your students. So I want you guys to come back in the comments in a week and let me know how that worked for you. Okay, and then it's my favorite time of the week. I'm going to hop on over to the post-dismissal debrief. Today we are talking about the bean soup theory from social media. I'm also going to give you guys a list of things that I will absolutely judge another teacher for, and things I will never judge another teacher for. And then following up on our substitute talk from last week, I'm going to give you guys some notes from a substitute teacher on what is helpful for her in doing her job. So as always, I hope this helps, and I'll see y'all next time.